The sign read, Nassau Arts Student Council Program Board presents the Interflux Cultural Center and Worm Shop. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life, was Simon's considered opinion. But Dave Roper and his following refused to participate without equal billing for the worm store, so the sign was a bit of a compromise. In fact, if it hadn't been for the worm store, which had now been moved behind the big tent, Simon felt he could almost lose sight of the fact that the Cultural Center had started out as a ploy to keep Lot 1346B from Interflux's greedy hands. Yep. Over the last couple of days, he had really gotten caught up in the preparations for the big Wednesday night opening, much different from the man who had threatened to take Phil's life early Monday morning. The Cultural Center appealed to him for 3 reasons. First, it was the perfect activity for Nassau Arts. Second, with the whole idea so widely attributed to him, he had become a genuine superstar on the student scene. And third, with the staff so enthusiastically involved, he felt far safer than in the early days when it always looked as though he were about to take the fall over his unauthorized actions. There were about 60 pieces of work on display on opening night, about half of them paintings, the rest sculptures, prints, innovative arts projects, and photographs. The setup was impressive, as Nassau Arts' display facilities were among the very best, with attractive mounts, professional glass cases, and carefully placed spotlights. A string quartet played background music for the 300 or so staff, students, and parents who attended the Wednesday night pre-Thanksgiving sneak preview. The center was to have its regular opening for the public Saturday afternoon. While Simon was acknowledged as the mastermind behind the Cultural Center, the true father was definitely Phil Baldwin. Although he seemed content to let Simon take the credit, he toured the exhibits in obvious pride and pleasure. For Phil, who despite his potential failed at so much often, the Cultural Center was a triumph beyond measure. These handshakes really should be yours, you know, Simon said to him in the middle of the evening. If you ask me, I'd say you show a lot of potential in organizing cultural centers. Phil grinned. Shh, the tent might still cave in. Simon was somewhat distracted by the fact that Wendy was also there in her capacity as president of the student council, and his conscious effort not to think about her was making him think about her. Because she was playing the hostess, the scowl she usually reserved for him was absent, and she looked so good that he found himself toying with the idea that there was still a chance, however remote, that Barbara had been telling the truth and that Wendy liked him. With grim determination, he decided it would be better to make a complete idiot of himself in front of these hundreds of people than to live 5 more minutes agonizing over the possibility that there was no joke and that he was passing up this terrific opportunity. Okay, thought Simon, this was it. 0 hour. Time to settle the matter for better or worse, probably worse. Mentally, he laid in a course for where Wendy was standing and commanded his feet to await orders from the bridge. All right, go. His heart was pounding in his throat. Hold on a second. Why was he so scared of her? She was just another face in the Nassau Arts dance studio. And he was Simon Irving, a big man to whom 7-foot basketball centers came for help and guidance. Confidence surged through his body, and the racing of his heart slowed as he faced her. Hi, Wendy. Having a nice time? Until you got here, what do you want? The pounding returned to Simon's throat as his confidence deserted him. His feet were frantically signaling the bridge, begging for orders. Retreat! Retreat! No. There was no turning back. He looked right her in the eye and blurted, I want you to go into a movie with me Friday night. As soon as the words left his lips, he knew he'd made the fatal mistake. She would cut him down in front of all these people, and everyone would know that he wasn't Simon Irving Big Man, he was Simon Irving Idiot. What time? Huh? What time are you going to pick me up? 7:30, he managed in a strangled voice as the string quartet swung into Love is a Many-Splendored Thing. Simon was fighting a new battle now. That of restraining the goofy grin that was on the verge of blooming on his face. A big man would accept this triumph as a standard matter of course. It was the idiot in him that wanted to run around cheering. So he committed her address to memory, tore himself from her side, and continued to mingle with the gold medal nonchalance. But when Phil, who showed great potential at lip reading, flashed him a triumphant grin and gave him the thumbs up signal, the wide smile broke through Simon's artificial calm. He was then forced to flee the tent and do his grinning in the woods. By the time he had calmed down enough to re-enter the tent, the pre-Thanksgiving sneak preview had grown into an unqualified success, and hopes for the cultural center were high. For Simon, it was definitely a good night, probably the best in 16 1/3 years. Here he was, with Wendy in his back pocket, the Vishnik prize in the palm of his hand, and Interflux once more on the run. Simon and his father took no chances with Thanksgiving dinner. After much searching, Mr. Irving managed to locate a single 19-year-old mail clerk from Kansas City to drag home for the major meal. Simon brought T.C. Surratt, whose current hosts were dining with relatives. This was the first time T.C. had ever accepted hospitality for which he had performed no service, but since Simon was a high dignitary on the Nassau art scene, the exception seemed okay. The strategy worked too, since neither beans nor greens made it to the table, so the heads of Interflux and Antiflux spent Thanksgiving side by side, being thankful. If Mr. Irving had been briefed on the Nassau Arts Cultural Center at all, he certainly didn't show it. Or at least Simon didn't notice anything. But Simon himself was so overwhelmed by the prospect of his upcoming date with Wendy that he wasn't noticing much. The only other matter he could seem to think about with any clarity was the Vishnik prize. And on the Friday exactly 1 week before the deadline, he put the final touches on Subway Breakdown. He was so pleased with his entry that the only thing that kept him from going out to buy a trophy case was the fact that he didn't want to get any dust on the Firebird, which he had spent all morning waxing and polishing. A horror movie, Phil had said. Take her to a horror movie. Trust me. Killville was the most appalling experience of Simon's life, although Wendy didn't seem affected in the least. When it was over, Simon excused himself, went to the washroom, and applied a wet towelette to the back of his neck. This restored some of the color to his face. He was now ready to continue the date. Wendy wanted to go out for a bite to eat. Okay, they would go. Salads, Phil had advised on the subject. A burger's got no class, and steaks will have you in the poorhouse. You want salads with cheese and rolls, but watch those poppy seeds. If they get in your teeth, you're dead. Mars, located in Fosterville, was a trendy sort of place for a late bite, and it was quite noisy and crowded when Simon and Wendy were escorted to their table. It was so dark that Simon fell down, and the only fact that Wendy had taken his hand kept it from being a total wipeout. I guess you must think I'm a pretty big idiot, he said as he very carefully eased himself into his chair. One leg was shorter than the others, and it rocked. Wendy smiled. Simon, you're nervous. No, lied Simon, it was dark. I didn't see the step. She laughed, indicating that she didn't buy it, but her expression was so totally open and friendly that Simon could hardly believe it was Wendy. This was the girl who hadn't called him anything but sleazebag since she'd done a number on him in the warm-up studio so many weeks ago. He was beginning to relax, and suddenly Phil's voice came to haunt him once more. Keep the conversation going. Any silence longer than 5 minutes, and she can nail you on a nothing in common rap. Doesn't matter what you talk about, so long as you talk. So, Wendy, what do you think about all this warm weather we've been having? I don't think about it at all, said Wendy honestly. Simon, we're not robots. Let's just talk, okay? I'm not gonna shoot you with a fire extinguisher this time. That's good, grinned Simon, because I think I'm allergic to the foam. I had hives for a week. The tension engine disintegrated, and the two began laughing and joking about the events that had led up to the glory that was now Interflux. The light chatter continued in an easy manner as they gave their orders and later set to their food. By this time, the conversation was going so well that they were actually talking about the bad old days, speaking with amused tolerance about their past feud. Simon wisely refrained from pointing out that the only person feuding had been Wendy. He had been willing to submit to the perils of boyfriend syndrome from day one. Simon, when you convinced all the kids to go out there and cut weeds, I almost died. I figured they'd run up on the platform and choke you. Simon shrugged. I was the most surprised guy in the place. A good gust of wind would have flattened me. Wendy laughed again, and Simon beamed. So, this was a date. The only other date he'd ever been on in his life had been a night on the town in Albuquerque with the 15-year-old daughter of Interflux's regional vice president, an experience so boring and uncomfortable that a lesser man might have sworn off women for life. Nothing like tonight, a perfect evening with the girl of his dreams. It's going well, Phil had said. Don't get cocky. You're bound to say something stupid and blow it. Well, Phil, what do you know? When a girl likes you so much that she doesn't get turned off by you taking a spill in the restaurant, nothing can go wrong. Besides, he decided, the rest of tonight was going to be pure finesse. They lingered long after the food had disappeared, putting down Coke after Coke, discussing anything and everything from world politics to Nassau arts. Feeling he could share almost anything with this girl, Simon mentioned how he felt a little hurt over how Sam had disappeared off the face of the earth ever since he'd started going out with Barbara. Wendy nodded in agreement. It won't last. They're not a good pair. Barbara's a girl with so much going for her, while Sam has exactly one thing going for him, his looks. Now, we, on the other hand... A sour note struck Simon in the midst of the gorgeous symphony he'd been hearing for the last 2 hours, jarring him from his image of tonight as perfection. He must have looked strange, because when he said, Simon, are you okay? All of a sudden you're in another world. No, it's nothing, you were saying. Well, I was talking about how we get along because we're so similar, but that Sam and Barbara just won't work out. It's just like Bill McIntosh. You know, a lot of girls are really dying to go out with him. Why do you think that is? Because they like the Legend of the Glass Caves? Be real. If he was 5'1" instead of 7'1", it'd be a lot different. Well, Simon said carefully, a lot of people at school are really good at one thing. Take Johnny Zoll, probably the best young guitarist in the country. That's my point, said Wendy smugly. If a girl dated him just because she admired his guitar playing, it wouldn't work out. He needs someone who likes him for himself. Oh, like, I wonder if Ziggy Stardust has a kid sister. But people are more complicated than that, Simon argued. Look at someone like Phil. He's good at a lot of things. She laughed. Or nothing, depending how you want to look at it. What's the story with him, Simon? I've heard rumors that he blows from department to department until he gets thrown out. Do you think it's good for the school that people can do that? I sure don't. Simon sat very still and made no reply, heedless of Phil's guidelines. He had nothing he felt like adding to what she had just said. He reached into his wallet, tossed some bills on the table, and stood up. Let's go for a drive, he said grimly. Sure, where to? It's a surprise. Wendy seemed to get the idea that his humorless matter was some kind of game. Okay, she said, forcing an artificial scowl on her face. We'll both be really serious. She held her expression as she got into the Firebird and drove off. Soon, though, she began to giggle. Oh, come on, Simon, where are we going? I don't want to spoil the surprise. In 5 minutes, he pulled up in front of her house. Surprise! Why are we here? I don't get it. Think a little harder. Now the scowl was real. Do you mean to tell me that you're sore because of what I said about your friends? I was only trying to open your eyes to... Simon hit the button, which unlocked the passenger door. I like it fine with my eyes closed. She seemed mystified. Look, I'm sorry, okay? I didn't know you were going to be so sensitive about it. I promise not to say anything more about your friends. You've said enough. Face flaming red, she jumped out of the car and slammed the door hard enough to bend the frame. I wouldn't have anything to do with you if you were the last man in the universe. I was right the first time. You're a sleazebag! She wheeled and headed for her front door, so she may or may not have heard Simon's next comment, spoken to no one in particular. I'm not, you know, he mused thoughtfully. If I was a real sleazebag, you'd be walking now. Okay, first off, hi, Reprogram 2012. Glad you get here. Like I said, we're in the middle of Chapter 13 of Son of Interflux. Going to be going for a couple minutes longer, and then I'll explain the rest of the night, hopefully. One moment. It was a little before midnight, and Simon didn't feel like going home. He pulled onto the Sunrise Highway and began to drive at the speed of traffic. He felt very calm, not sure whether his spirits were up or down, and he popped a cassette tape into the tape deck for a little mood music. Slow riffs, blues guitar, perfect. He was sub-dazed, he decided, very cool, very mellow. The Firebird rode like silk, and out the windows Long Island rolled by, punctuated by carloads of young locals out for their Friday night cruise. Few moments, he decided, were as well put together as this one. As he waited for a traffic light to change, the voice of a well-known blues singer intoned, "You ain't got nobody if you ain't got somebody," and the perfection of the moment vanished in a puff of smoke. "What have I done?" he howled aloud as the traffic behind began to honk for him to move out. In anguish, he pulled over to the side of the road and beat his forehead rhythmically against the padded steering wheel. All year he had agonized over Wendy Orr, through times where the mere mention of his name had been enough to make her snarl. For months he had hoped against hope that he would be able to get near her. All his life he'd never been able to get a girl to look at him twice, but someone as attractive as Wendy had seemed totally out of reach. Yet he'd had not one, but two opportunities with this great-looking dancer. The first time, he'd burned her for $6,700, and now he'd just thrown her out of his car. What was he, crazy? But he'd done it for his friends, the people who'd taken in a lonely Simon Irving in a new town and a new school. In the case of Phil and Sam, that was friendship above and beyond the call of duty, not caring if he was stupid, or impulsive, or harebrained, or the son of Interflux. These people deserved the stand he'd taken for them tonight. Yeah, so big deal. So what if Wendy didn't like Phil, Sam, Bill, and Johnny Zoll? He couldn't imagine any of them sitting down and sobbing because Wendy didn't think they were up to scratch. It was all nothing but a bunch of words. Yes, for the sake of a few stupid words, he'd thrown away the girl of his dreams, thereby earning himself a place in history as a Class A boob. Just another typical life in the life of Simon Irving, genius extraordinaire. He drove straight home. It was not sensible for such a fool to be loose on the streets. As the Irving's automatic garage door rolled up, the Firebird's headlights illuminated a shadowy figure sitting on the woodpile just inside. Simon stopped short and squinted through the gloom. It was almost 1 o'clock in the morning. What was Johnny Zoll doing camped out in his garage? He parked the car in the driveway, got out, and approached cautiously. "Johnny, is that you?" "Yeah, man, it's me." The voice seemed exhausted and empty, and the guard spoke with much more slowly than was his habit. "What's up?" Nothing much. I've had a rotten night. How about you?" Johnny was silent for a moment. His eyes scoured the deserted block. "What a lousy neighborhood. How can you stand this place?" "Yeah, well, we've been petitioning the town hall for some tenements, but so far no luck. Is that why you're here, to pass judgment on my street?" "There are times, man, when a guy needs his lab partner." "Yeah," Simon agreed irritably. "In the lab, doing experiments, writing reports." "Not that stuff. I'm talking about when things go really bad. Not just ordinary bad, but when it's like all the kicks in the face in the world come together for the ultimate negativity trip." Simon stared at him. "What happened?" Johnny's face mirrored a deep sense of loss. "I just can't believe it. I think about it now. I still can't believe it's all over. Outer Nimrod, man. We busted up the group today. Simon sighed. Oh, Johnny, I'm sorry. Johnny shifted on the wood pile and a large log tumbled onto Simon's toe. This afternoon I went into the city to meet the guys because the band's been planning on some new gigs lately. We ended up going out for a glass of tomato juice at this great condemned restaurant near Frida's place. We got to talking about why we're so much better than everybody else, and I said that our secret was that we'd never sell out. I mean, even if we got rich and famous, we wouldn't buy big houses or fancy cars or gold chains. We wouldn't give big parties or take baths in expensive champagne or live high. We wouldn't play in places like Shea Stadium or Madison Square Garden. We'd stick to the classy clubs like Scuzz. And I must have said the wrong thing because this big fight started. And then I found out that those three guys who I thought were special were just as big sellouts as anybody else. They want this, man! He made a sweeping gesture to take in their surroundings. Long Island, money, plastic. Ig said he wanted to marry some rich guy's daughter, so Frida threatened to go on the wrestling circuit full time. Neb challenged them both, saying he could always go back to Harvard and finish up his PhD. And before I knew it, just because of money, Outer Nimrod, the most meaningful thing in my life was in the toilet. So you came here, said Simon lamely. Johnny shrugged. Where else would I go? I showed up around 10 and your old man told me you weren't home and I didn't think he'd be into me hanging out for a while. So I decided to wait in here and maybe catch a few Z's until he got back. But I couldn't sleep, man. I had to talk to you. And it's not just because you're my lab partner either. It's because you're just such a with it kind of guy. You know exactly where your head's at. I mean, you're as cool as an average dude in the school hall. You're cool leading us all in Interflux. And even like a place like Scuzz, you're cool enough to be the first guy to stand up. And that's why I thought of you when my whole life converted itself into a piece of junk. Simon swallowed hard. Why were people coming to him with their troubles? He didn't even have the judgment to decide whether this evening had been a noble defense of his friends or an act of cataclysmic stupidity. Well, Johnny, I don't know what to tell you, he said in a with-it sort of way. Johnny nodded resignedly. Yeah, man, I know. But I really appreciate you taking the time to listen. By the way, you know you got poppy seeds in your teeth?